What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have another special video. Man, I just keep dropping special video after special video for you guys. Hopefully you guys are liking them. Hopefully you guys don't hate me because I drop a lot of crazy videos sometimes too. But right now we're going to be looking at the Google Pixel. Okay, now this is a phone that I personally love. I love this phone so much, and I feel like as time progresses this phone just keeps getting better and better. Now there's a lot of things wrong with this phone too, but there's nothing really. I feel like this phone is extremely safe. I realized in 2019 I'm recommending this phone quite a bit to people. Before it was like the Nexus 6P and like the Nexus 5X, but those phones have kind of, taken a toll on me because they have a lot of problems with them. But with the Google Pixel, I feel like it's a different story. So if you're watching this video because you want to get a Google Pixel in 2019, this is the video for you. So pretty much, starting off looking around the body, this is obviously kind of a different approach Google took with this. I feel like with the Nexus, just think about it, two phones previous to this honestly looked better than what this one was. This phone is not the best looking phone ever, and what I mean by that is the Nexus 6. That thing had front facing speakers, very slim bezels. Even the Nexus 5X and Nexus 6P, they took advantage of those bigger bezels on the front by putting front facing speakers. But with the Google Pixel, we just literally have big bezels on the front. And looking at the trend we have now with like slimmer bezels and smaller phones with like bigger screens, that's pretty much the exact opposite of what Google did here. I honestly don't know what they did with this. This thing looks worse than the Nexus 4, and that thing had huge bezels too. Even the Nexus 5, this thing like literally didn't have too much going for it in terms of the way it looked. But as I always say, looks can be deceiving. And the front, if you get the white version, I had the white one, you can see that I feel like the black version looks a lot better than the white one because that little proximity sensor on the top just kind of makes this phone not look as good as it should. If you get the black model, that kind of hides it out a little bit. So that's kind of one advantage of getting a different model over this one. They have the exact same features though. And looking at the bottom, we have a USB Type-C port. We also have a headphone jack on this phone. Turning it on the back, we have kind of a half like aluminum build, half glass build. So up top we have a glass panel. So unfortunately there's no wireless charging or anything, so that really sucks. But you do have a fingerprint sensor on the back, so it's really not that bad. You also have a single camera sensor on the back too, and I'll get into all the little details about this phone in a second. But what I can tell you is this phone is fairly solid, and in terms of build quality, this phone isn't horrible, but looking at the trend that we have now, like I stated, this phone could have 100% have been better looking in my opinion. And it's funny because the Google Pixel XL, the bigger version of this, was literally just a bigger version of this. Like you see with the Google Pixel 2 XL, they kind of differentiated a little bit, like the slimmer bezels and everything, but it's kind of funny what they did with this one. But that's pretty much what we have on the outside. We have a 5-inch AMOLED display, very decent. It's 1080p. Pretty high PPI as well. It's 441 pixels per inch, and I will say it's a pretty decent panel overall. It's not horrible. I'm thanking God that it's AMOLED and it's not like IPS, so that's pretty cool. This thing also is splash and dust resistant. It doesn't really state if it's like IP68 or IP67, but it does have some splash and dust resistance, so that's pretty cool. I noticed in 2016 when this phone was released, a lot of phones would be coming, be getting released with some type of IP certification, so that's super cool as well. And I guess the biggest disadvantage of this phone, not the biggest, but kind of a weird thing, is there's no like expandable storage, but I don't believe any Nexus phone had expandable storage. Maybe the Galaxy Nexus, I could be wrong though, or maybe even the Nexus 1, I don't really remember, but most of the recent Nexus phones, even some of the more recent Android phones in general, do not bring expandable storage, so that's kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. Now turning this thing on is probably one of the biggest advantages of this phone is the software, and it started off with Android Nougat, which was 7.1, and now it is upgradable to Android 9.0, which is Android Pie. Now I'm unsure if this phone is going to get Android Q, and the reason I say that is because this phone has already gotten several versions of Android. Sometimes they do 3 years of support, sometimes they do 4 years of support, so I could totally see it stopping on Android Pie, but I could also see it continuing on to Android Q, depending if Google wants to extend it or not. As of now, I haven't heard of any news about that, but as of most other Google phones, direct phones through Google, there's a lot of third-party development community behind it, so a lot of custom ROMs and a lot of rooting options as well. So even if this phone is done being supported through Google, you can always go on the third-party route, install like Lineage OS or install whatever you want to. A lot of third-party developers are out there using this phone still, and they want to extend this phone's lifespan as long as they can. So I would, this phone's in terms of software support, even if it ends, officially by Google, whoever, there's going to be some type of third-party community behind it still pushing this phone forward. So that's always a really cool thing. That's why I love Pixel phones and most stock Android phones, because you can just keep installing software even when it's done. So that's a pretty cool thing on this thing, man. Now moving on to the performance aspect of it, I'll tell you the hardware, the specs it has inside, and I'll kind of elaborate on it a little bit. So it has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 821 chipset, a quad-core CPU, an Adreno 530 GPU, and 4 gigs of RAM. And what I can tell you is, in terms of performance on this phone, it's really not that bad. I don't think it's bad at all. I definitely think it's still pretty good. I think whatever you're going to do with it, I think maybe one thing I don't like is probably the gesture-based like kind of thing they have going. I think on iPhones and iOS, they have a really cool thing they have going for it. But in terms of Android, it just seems like, I don't know, I don't really like it that much. I think OnePlus did a pretty decent job on their OS 2 right now, but for just the whole gesture base, I don't really like it on the Google Pixel, but that's not really a huge reason why to hate on it. I mean, the performance itself is actually pretty good. Multitasking is very good. When I'm going through apps, I mean, the 4 gigs of RAM really help, but I'm going through apps, I'm just kind of scrolling through whatever, I'm going into a game and then going into a web page, this thing will pretty much handle it just fine. I don't really have any crazy problems with it, no crazy complaints. I really wish I did so I can elaborate further, but other than that, I mean, there's really nothing too crazy to hate on it. Even with gaming, I found gaming to be pretty good as well. Casual games like Pew Pew and Stack and Paper.io, those games run perfectly fine. I don't have any problems with those. Even with Real Racing 3, which is the heavier game, if you guys want me to start doing another game besides Real Racing 3, let me know. That has been my heavy intensive game for a while. I might switch it up soon, but it's just the one I know and I always go to it. So let me know in the comment section below if you guys want me to switch that up. But yeah, Real Racing 3, 3D games, they're all going to run fine. I mean, the performance of this phone is not a bad thing at all. It's still very good. It's still very competitive. Is it the best thing in the world? Obviously not. I mean, this thing was released almost 3 years ago, but it's still very capable. And I would honestly be surprised if you would be able to notice a phone that was like twice as fast as this. If you're not comparing a phone side by side, you're probably not going to care. And surprisingly, the Google Pixel 3 XL and this phone actually had the same amount of RAM. So kind of an important thing to note. Doesn't really mean too much, but I'm sure the Google Pixel 3 XL is faster, but that's kind of a cool thing to note. Now moving on to the camera, this is honestly pretty surprising because at the time of its release, a lot of people were hyping it up, saying it was a really good camera, and I still believe it. I still think this camera is still pretty good. It's 12.3 megapixels, it has laser autofocus, and it can shoot 4K videos and even 1080p videos that add up to 120 frames per second. So those things are actually really cool, and I think the camera is actually pretty decent. Is it the best camera in the world? Probably not anymore, but I definitely have respect for it. The shots that you can take on it are pretty good. I'm just not that huge of a photographer, so I don't really like know what to talk about sometimes, even though I've been reviewing phones for years and years now. I just look at a camera and I'm like, is it good? Yes or no? Yes, it is. Okay, that's perfect. If it's not, then no, it's not. You know, but this phone camera is, if you're not comparing it next to like a DSLR or an iPhone XS or a Google Pixel 3 XL, probably not going to notice a difference. I mean, maybe the only gripe I have is probably the settings and the features this camera has. I mean, if you look at like the Google Pixel 3 XL, that thing has a lot more features than this thing. And if you're comparing the two side by side, you'll probably notice that. But other than that, I think the raw photos this thing takes are pretty good. And it has an 8 megapixel front facing camera too. You can shoot 1080p videos at up to 30 frames per second. And overall, I think the camera quality is very good still. It's not a con at all. I mean, if you want to, you can make this thing take really good photos, really good videos. Actually, when this thing was released, it had like the DxO, whatever, that mark score, whatever. It was like highly rated, and it's still, I mean, it's still a very good camera in my opinion. Now moving on to the battery life, this is one of those aspects that it could have been better. It has a 2,770 mAh battery, and low key, I kind of do wish it was better, because if they put like a 3,000 mAh battery in it, that would have just kind of rounded it out and made me feel a lot better about this device. I think it's okay. It's very average. This phone isn't extremely heavily spec'd, so I guess there's really not too much to say about that. I just think, you know, and this thing also has stock Android, so I don't think it's like crazily under battery power or anything. I don't think you're going to be like, I think you're going to be able to get through a day on pretty average use, but what I'm basically trying to get at is the battery life could have been better if they put a bigger size battery in it, but because it's on stock Android and everything, I guess it's like pretty average. It's not like above and beyond or anything, so kind of a sad thing. I wish they did put a bigger battery, but I mean, it is what it is. Now, some other notable things to note, like I said, this thing does have a fingerprint sensor on the back, and I found it to be pretty decent. You know, I think, you know, if you just put your finger over it and you take your phone out of your pocket, you'll be able to unlock it, and it's actually really cool. I like that. The way this phone looks is probably going to be the make it or break it deciding factor for you, because I think every single other thing about this phone is pretty good, except the way this phone looks. But if you can get over the looks, sometimes, you know, this can go into your real life too. If you see a person, they look a little weird, but you know, it's all about the inside that matters. People say the same thing about me. They're like, man, you don't look that good at all, but like, you're a really nice person. So I feel like me and this phone have a lot in common, honestly. So, and like in terms of software, I think it's pretty much done with Android Pie, but it could go forward to Android Q. I don't know yet, but there's going to be a lot of third-party development community behind it. So you know what, it is what it is, man. And to answer the question, is the Google Pixel still worth it in 2019? What I will tell you is, Absolutely, man. This phone is completely still worth it in 2019, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is not only because it's a Google Pixel device and it's on stock Android, the software is very, very good. The camera is still very decent. The battery life could have been better, but this thing has a fingerprint sensor. The build quality is pretty good too. I don't know if I already said that. And I think that with the way the phones are going now, I think they're just starting to look better, but I don't think they're trying to be like 100 times better than this phone. Like, there's no phone out there that's 3 times as good as this phone. I don't think. Now, there's phones that are very good and that are much, much better, but this phone can still do a lot that you want to do with it. And if you're comfortable rooting and custom ROMing your phone, that just adds so much more life into it. So what I'll tell you is, yes, I still think the Google Pixel is still good. If you want to pick them up for the lowest prices, obviously eBay, Craigslist, your mom, who's ever selling it, that's probably the cheapest places you can get them from. But surprisingly, I've seen the Google Pixels sell for less than $200 on Amazon. I think I've seen them for like $190, and that's a very, very competitive price, man. And there's not too many phones out there that are $190 that are like supported with stock Android, that are very well built, very good camera, and have a huge third-party community behind it. So I'll leave an Amazon link in the description below so you can get the phone on Amazon, obviously. Of course, if you buy it through that link, it helps support the channel a little bit too. We get to do more videos like this and do more giveaways and everything like that. So it really means so much if you guys could do that and purchase not only the phone, but really anything you want through those links. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button. That'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.